2021. In accordance with the Governor's Healthy Washington guidelines and an effort to protect city employees and members of the public from transmission of COVID-19, the City Council is conducting our weekly council meeting remotely. We are prepared to reopen the council chambers to public meetings when public health considerations indicate it is safe to do so. There are several ways in which you can engage with the council and participate in our meetings. To watch or participate in our remote meetings, you may watch council meetings live on Comcast Channel 21 or Frontier Channel 29. You may watch live online at www.everettwa.gov/citycouncil, where you may also watch past meetings. You may also call in to listen to the live meeting at any point by dialing 425-616-3920, conference ID 724-887-726#. You may find the public comment registration form on the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Once you go to register here to provide comment via Zoom, you will need to fill the form out completely if you wish to provide public comment at a future meeting. After the public comment form is submitted, you will receive an email confirmation with the Zoom link and the phone number to the meeting. Participants must submit this form at least 30 minutes prior to the meeting. Forms submitted after that time will not receive the Zoom link or number to speak, but may participate the day of the meeting by submitting comments in writing to council@everettwa.gov. For assistance, please contact the council office at 425-257-8703 or email Deb Williams at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. And please note that we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Outside of our meetings, members of the public are always welcome to contact council members or provide comments or concerns on any matter via email at council@everettwa.gov or by calling the City Council office at 425-257-8703. Clerk, will you please take the roll this evening?
Mayor Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Murphy.
Excused.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely.
Here.
Councilmember Tui.
Here.
Councilmember Bader.
Here.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
President Stonecipher.
Here. I'd like to ask Councilmember Tui to read the land acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you so much, Council President. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. I would like to ask Councilmember Bader, will you please do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the minutes of October 27th, 2021?
Councilmember Bader so moves.
Councilmember Tui seconds that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore.
Abstain.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Tui.
Yes.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Thank you. And now we'll move on to Mayor's comments for this evening. Good evening, Mayor Franklin.
Good evening, council members. No comment and no report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to our council comments and liaison reports, starting with Councilmember Moore.
No comments also tonight. I just thank our citizens for, well, actually, that would mean I do have one comment. I just thank our citizens for moving out and voting, and so many things that are important to our community are at hand, and we look forward to an ultimate result.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Greetings, everyone. I would like to request that we have and I can't remember when we were going to make that happen, but I have some questions. So not right now, obviously, but maybe just remind me when we're going to talk about that again and how it's supposed to work. And yeah, that's
Councilmember Vogely, I think my screen froze when you said what was the topic that you wanted to talk about? You just completely froze right there.
could have been me. Collaborative leadership.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. We are going to be talking about that at the first meeting of December. I can't remember the exact date, December 3rd, perhaps.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
I have no comments or questions or report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, House President Stonecipher. Just real quick, Parks Board meeting was earlier this week, and Parks Board heard more about the PROS plan as it moves forward for public comment, and ultimately, I think a request for recommendation from the Parks Board probably in early December. So we'll see that coming. And then also, obviously, today on our agenda, we have the agenda item about the parks impact fee, and so you'll hear much greater depth about that than I can share or should share. So that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. Just real quickly remind folks that we're really beginning the process of standing up the alignment for sound transit. I won't go into details. You can go on their website to get the information, but I think it's good to note that that work is really starting in earnest. Thanks.
Thank you. And I have no liaison report or comments this evening. Do we have an update from administration?
No administrative update this evening, Council President Stonecipher. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to City Attorney comments. Mr. Hall, what do you have for us this evening?
Thank you, Council President. Nothing to report tonight and no executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Williams, have we received any comments from the community for public comment?
Good evening, President Stonecipher. We have one invitation for the council members to attend an event. I will forward that on to everybody for them to see that that individual was signed up to speak tonight, but unfortunately I don't see them on here. Second of all, I just wanted to let you know that I believe you're looking at November 1 or November 8 after you have a meeting with administration in regards to Councilmember Vogely's item. December 3rd is a Friday. And
thank you.
You bet. And then finally, I have one individual signed up to speak on item number 8, and I will call on them at that time. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So that will be December 1st or December 8th for the collaborative leadership model discussion. Thank you. We have 5 items on our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the 5 items?
Councilmember Bader, so moves.
Councilmember Tui seconds the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for our consent agenda. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. We'll move now to our proposed action. We have 2 items on the list for proposed action, items 6 and 7. They've been read into the record previously, so I won't read them again this evening. They are both up for final reading and public hearing on November 10th. Does anyone have questions or comments on these proposed action items? If so, unmute yourself and make yourself known. Seeing none, we'll move on to the council briefing agenda. These items come before the City Council, serving as a council committee of the whole, and they are likely to be scheduled at a future meeting. Item 8 is Council Bill 2110-40, first reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance authorizing the editing of the Everett Municipal Code for gender neutrality as authorized under RCW 35.21.500. Third and final reading will be on November 24th, 2021. And I believe we have Yorick Stevens-Wajda here.
Thank you, Council President Stone-Cipher, and good evening, Council.
Good evening.
On the suggestion of members of the city's Diversity Advisory Board and other members of the Everett community, and wholeheartedly supported by Mayor Franklin and staff, we're taking a small step forward this evening towards an inclusive city with this proposed ordinance. The ordinance is fairly straightforward in its construction. State law provides authority for cities to codify the big stack of ordinances that are passed by the legislative body over time. I think there was an ordinance number 1 out there from 1893, and then thousands more have been added to the book since then. And we're authorized to codify that into a rationally organized and public-facing compilation that we know as Everett Municipal Code. Part of that authority provided by the state includes the ability for cities to edit ordinances to the extent deemed necessary or desirable for the purpose of modernizing and clarifying the language of such ordinances, but without changing the meaning of any such ordinance. The ordinance before you this evening would use that authority in state law to authorize staff to edit Everett Municipal Code to achieve gender neutrality to the extent that such edits would not and reliably would not change the meaning of a given provision. The city attorney would review all proposed changes as another couple set of eyes would to make sure that we're held to that standard. We asked the company that manages our online city code, Code Publishing, recently to pull all the sections of code that include some of the most frequent gender specific terms such as he, she, and his and hers. And once we have the go-ahead from the council, if and when, we will start working through what amounted to about 230 pages worth of sections of Everett Municipal Code. And we will use some standard techniques as a first run through, including the fancy sounding strategy suggested by our city attorney of reverting to the antecedent noun when there's an offending pronoun. If I'm not mistaken, the effort will not change the underlying ordinances, just that public-facing compilation of Everett Municipal Code, and there will always be a record of these edits for future checking and tracking. Happy to take any questions. Otherwise, that's the extent of my briefing. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go down the roll and see if anybody has questions on this, starting with Councilmember Moore.
No, thank you, Yorick. Excellent presentation.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes, thank you. My dog is now here. What does antecedent mean? I know I could just look it up on Google, but I do want an answer, but just a second. I heard you say he, her, she, him, and all of that, and I'm wanting to make sure that it's also firefighter, and maybe that's what antecedent is. And yeah, so police officer, firefighter, all of those things. That's it.
Yes, we would look for any gender specific term. I think firefighter would be gender neutral, but fireman, for instance, we would look for those. And then we've already removed many of those, so there aren't too many. There's a lot of he, she's, and his, hers. Those are a little bit more challenging. Antecedent means before, and so in the example that's in the ordinance, the mayor shall be the chief executive, ... Then it says employees under his jurisdiction, and we would change that to the antecedent noun, which is the mayor. And so we would say the mayor's jurisdiction instead of his jurisdiction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now Councilmember Tui.
No comments or questions. York, thank you. I'm glad to see this happening. Thank you.
Councilmember Bader.
And no questions or comments. I'm glad we got Code Publishing to pour through the code, and New York doesn't have to spend his time going through it page by page or line by line. Thanks.
Councilmember Roberts.
No comments or questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions or comments. We do have one of someone from the public was here to speak on this matter. Deb Williams, can you let that person address the council?
Thank you, President Stonecipher. Again, when I call your name, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if possible. Please begin by giving your name and city of residence for the record. Please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes. When you're at 30 seconds, please begin to wrap up. Natalie Tune, please go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm all set up. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Natalie Tune. I'm a lifelong Everett resident living in the Northwest neighborhood. I'm a business owner running a solo organic farm and an online antique business. I founded the Snohomish LGBTQIA Collective in 2020, and I'm a member of the Everett Diversity Advisory Board. One of the things I'm always working towards is better representation, inclusion, and safety for my fellow LGBTQ community members. As a non-binary trans identifying person, it means everything to me to see myself reflected in the foundational language of my city. The reason this is so important to me and should be to all our elected leaders is that every community member deserves to be included and represented, not only in our city's municipal code, but in every facet of government. The municipal code specifically is a collection of foundational documents containing all the various laws and ordinances of our city. As such, it should always reflect every community member, not just those who fall into the traditional gender binary. It's well past time we make inclusive language a priority from the ground up. This is why I've pushed so hard for this change over the last year, and I know I have Mayor Franklin's support. When we make representation a priority instead of an exception, we effectively fight against marginalization. We set a standard and an example of what it looks like to be an inclusive city that welcomes and recognizes the entirety of the community it serves, an example of steps toward equality for its gender nonconforming community members, and an example of common decency and the bare minimum when it comes to making sure all of us are seen, not just some of us. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. And I hope you are all as committed to the progress and visibility of our community as I am. Please do your part and support a gender neutral municipal code. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. We really appreciate your comments. President Stonecipher, that is all I have signed up to speak tonight. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Natalia, and thank you for your work on our Diversity Advisory Board. We have heard from everyone, and now, this is just a briefing. We will see, this will be back on our agenda on the 24th of this month for final action. We'll move on to briefing item 9, Council Bill 2110-41. This is the first reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance relating to planning for parks, amending ordinances 354317 and 354317 as part of the 2021 annual docket of comprehensive plan amendments, adding a new chapter 19.53 EMC, establishing a park impact fee, and amending ordinance 3774-20. The third and final reading and public hearing on this item will be on November 17th, 2021. And I believe York, we have the York show tonight. So is that York or is that you, Bob?
I'll kick it off quickly, and then we'll turn to Bob and Lisa Gruder with Burke Consultants. So York Stevens Wajda, Planning Director. Under state law, I'll go really quick with a introduction here. Under state law, the city must group amendments to its comprehensive plan into a single annual package or docket of amendments. The point of that requirement is to allow for a review of cumulative impacts, to improve public participation by avoiding a drumbeat of amendments that's difficult to follow, and to keep the comprehensive plan as a relatively high level and long-term plan with some momentum to it. This year's package of amendments includes 3 proposals, each with their own ordinance, and we'll wrap up with a resolution later on declaring this year's amendments complete. Our esteemed consultant for the parks item has to leave at 7:30, so we're going to jump straight to item C, which is parks, and then we'll come back to A and B afterwards. So I will run through, sorry for the spoilers there. Here we are with parks, and we've got Bob Leonard and Lisa Gruder with Burke Consulting, I believe, will be leading off on this item.
Bob Leonard, Parks and Facilities, and I just wanted to take the time to introduce Lisa Greeter with Burke Consulting. They've been helping us with the pros plan and then the development of the park capital, park impact fees. So, yeah. Lisa?
Great, and good evening, council members and mayor. So we're going to cover a quick overview of the schedule for these items, give you a little background on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan, and get right into the proposal that York described, the policy changes and the impact fee and so on. So our overall schedule, we started in January with the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan with some visioning, and then developed some concepts, and the draft plan is out there now. At the same time, we've been working on establishing the impact fee, and that needs to be based on a level of service and a capital plan that's established in the comprehensive plan. So simultaneously, we've been working on that aspect, and it went to the Planning Commission in September and October, and is now before you. And the goal is to have the impact fee and the related comprehensive plan amendments completed this year with the docket. The pros plan will continue on. It is due by March 1st to the Recreation Conservation Office. And so it is undergoing review by the Parks Board right now, and then it'll transition to the council with the ideal transition January 1. And this is a broader view that shows that these components, the parks element, the impact fee, and the pros plan, do support your overall comprehensive plan. And you're about to go into a periodic review of that plan that is due in middle of 2024. So we've been doing this work with an eye towards that overall update. And so the pros plan is going out to the year 2044 to match where you're going with the comprehensive plan. So we'll start first with a little bit of background on the parks plan, pros plan, because it has led to some of the engagement and some of the level of service proposals. So just as a background, the Everett Parks Recreation Open Space Plan was last updated in 2016. It is updated approximately every 6 years to be compliant with the Recreation Conservation Office requirements. It allows Everett to be eligible for state grants, and it also supports the comprehensive plan and your budgeting. I wanted to cover what engagement we've been doing for the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan, because it has influenced the policy amendments and the level of service and capital program that's before you. So in the spring and summer, we did an engagement process that had quite a bit of participation from 700 people overall, from a vision survey, some pop-up events in the park, and a workshop. Right now, we have the draft pros plan out with a story map and a survey, and we've been taking it in components through the Parks Board over the summer and fall. And you can find this latest story map and that survey at the link you see in the blue bar there, everettwa.gov/pros plan. What we've been hearing are a number of themes about having a well-connected parks plan, or park system rather, and a lot of comments about support for the natural environment, tree canopy, the access to shorelines, as well as active spaces, play areas, ball fields, and so on. So that has influenced some of the policy amendments before you. So we'll cover some highlights of the comprehensive plan elements and impact fee. So first, just an overview about impact fees. They are a one-time charge, and it is to have growth help pay for growth. It is not the sole funding source for capital improvements for new growth. So it is sort of a joint effort. And the impact fees are there to help ensure that the parking system is improved as community members come into Everett. And the city currently does charge transportation and school impact fees and some similar kind of system fees for water and sewer systems. An impact fee has to be based on a level of service and linked to the capital project list. And so that's why you have both a code before you as well as some element proposals. The current comprehensive plan and your PROS plan both anticipate a range of funding sources. As we mentioned, that parks impact fees cannot be the sole source for funding capital improvements that add capacity to the system. So you do have policies though that do highlight parks impact fees as a component of funding sources. It is up to Everett to determine the best mix of funding sources. So we're bringing before you one of those components that you've identified both in your current parks element and your capital facilities element. So we have 4 pieces that were in your packet. We have the parks and recreation element, 2 elements basically, parks and recreation and capital facilities. And then we have 2 code components, the impact fee code, and then there's a related fee in lieu for private on-site open space. And we're going to cover all 4 of those in this presentation. One of the things that we needed to do for both the parks element and the capital facilities element was update the inventory information. So we've used the information gathered for the PROS plan and for this effort for the impact fee to identify the current acres and trail miles in the park system. We've also looked at the access that residents have. Does everyone have a park within a 10-minute walk? And generally across the city, you have almost 2/3 of the community that are within a 10-minute walk of a park or trail. And then you have District 4 in the south there that is a bit below that. So as we get into the levels of service, we're going to look at this inventory of parks and trails and where they're located, and you'll start to see some aspects of our level of service that are meant to get at ensuring everybody's got access. The policy amendments, in addition to the inventory information, they do identify how these elements relate to other city initiatives. So the climate plan and various transportation plans and shoreline plans show the connection between this effort and existing efforts. And then a series of goals and policies and actions in the parks and recreation element. In the capital facilities element, the main issue here is to identify the capital program. There's other kind of clarifying consistency amendments and updates to outdated text. So the level of service is a key component of the parks and recreation element, and there's 3 aspects to it. So one is what assets will we be improving as growth occurs? And that would be taking those park acres and trail miles and dividing by the current population. And as we grow, the new residents would have access to a similar rate of parks and trails. And that way the quality of the system for existing residents also is maintained. So we would increase to meet the demand of growth at a similar rate as today. And then for access, we're proposing to improve access to parks within a 10-minute walk so that every district at least achieves the citywide rate. So that would mean trying to make sure there's at least almost 2/3 of the population has access in each district and nothing below that. And then capital investment is investing in dollar terms at a rate like the current system. So we took the value of the current system and divided by today's population, and then said as we grow, try to maintain that kind of system value. So what that looks like in terms of the acres and miles that we would add is between now and a 10-year period, which is the period within which the city could charge park impact fees. So we went out 2021 to 2031. The city would add developed acres That may be acres you already own, but the parks are not yet open. So CEMEX would be an example of that. That would be developing, improving what you have. So that would be about 64 acres over the next 10 years. And you could do a lot of that with CEMEX and maybe some other properties. And then neighborhood parks or urban parks, adding that at a similar rate. And that would be smaller parks that are closer into the residential areas as well as your mixed use areas. So downtown or along the corridors where you've identified for mixed use. The transit station areas would be other places, and those might be more urban in nature. But that would be to add another 20 acres there. And then adding miles of paths on parks, so existing parks and adding loop trails. And then multipurpose would be the off-street, larger regional trails like the interurban, adding another 4 miles. If you were to do that and grow at a rate like the value per capita that we have today, you would add capital projects at up to 129 million. However, we've set up the level of service policies so that what controls is if you can meet your acres and your miles and have it within a 10-minute walk of the population, those are the overriding factors. And the secondary consideration is the investment amount. So if you can be efficient with your program, your capital program. So what we're suggesting is a capital program that is of about 79 million. Rather than 129 million. But that just gives us sort of a benchmark to look at. But the overriding consideration is putting the acres and miles in proximity to the population. With those two components, the level of service policy and the capital program in particular, then we set about to look at what a parks impact fee might look like. So some of the requirements, we talked a bit about it. It has to respond to growth. We are consistent with the growth targets in your comprehensive plan, but we are focused on that 10-year period within which the state law allows the city to collect. We've talked about it needs to be based on a level of service and that it needs to fund park system improvements that are in the capital facilities element. Some other components, we need to balance impact fees and other sources of public funds. So you'll see that in your rate study in the packet, we've accounted for the likely future amount of REIT 2 that the city currently uses for a portion of its capital. And so we've identified that and subtracted that from the potential fee. It has to have a schedule of fees for types of development. So we're proposing that it apply to new residential development and a share of the new commercial development. And here we mean office, retail, and industrial. It would only be for projects that are adding a net new space. So if someone's renovating a home that exists, they would not be charged that fee. Or if somebody was doing tenant improvements and not adding more capacity to a building, that wouldn't be charged. There are other aspects that are optional, and there is an optional phase-in period for developments that are already in progress, and we'll talk a bit about that. So just to kind of step back a bit, we talked about how on the per capita basis for the investment level of service, we could have had a program that was closer to 129 million. And on a per bedroom basis, that would be about $2,960. And that would be the maximum you could have charged. So if we had a mix of capital projects proposed that achieved that amount and were for new growth and met other aspects of your level of service, that could have been the amount. Instead, we're more at that modest middle range capital program of 78.8 million. That's more like 1,882 per bedroom. So that's about a third less. So it's 64% of the full fee potential. And then you'll see as we work our way through this, the rest of the slides here, that the recommendation from staff that was endorsed by the Planning Commission was to do 50% of that project-based fee. So half of the 1882 is the $941 per bedroom. So about a third of what the full fee potential would be. So here's what this looks like if you were to put together a rate schedule that's required. So on the left-hand side, we have the land uses or the development types. And then this is the way it would be in your code. There's a rate per square foot for non-residential uses, and then there's a rate per bedroom. And the proposal per bedroom is because a lot of the city's growth potential is likely in attached units. It could be townhomes, it could be apartments, there may be a few single family homes, but doing it by per bedroom is a simpler way for staff to review a full range of different residential types that you may expect to see. So it's a sort of a capacity for people per bedroom. And this is what the 50% fee looks like when we compare to some peer communities in the region and also those in Snohomish County. So the red bars on the far left, that's the one bedroom. The slightly to the right of that is the two bedroom red bar. And you can see where two bedroom, by the way, is the most common number of bedrooms in your units in Everett. So we are on the lower end of the spectrum there. Bothell, Renton, Mount Lake Terrace, Bellingham, Kent, Auburn, et cetera, are off to the right. A three bedroom, which is the second most common unit type, is in the middle of those example communities. Most communities charge a single family and a multifamily fee. That's why you see the dark green as a single family and the light green is multifamily. But we are going by bedroom here. The next slide shows if we had charged if we were recommending the full fee, you'd be at the one bedroom still on the lower end, but by the two bedroom, three bedroom start to approach more the other examples further in the middle of the range. And then in terms of the commercial fee, fewer agencies tend to provide for commercial fees, but for those that do, the 50% fee is on the lower end there. And we have it by retail, industrial, and office. Some communities do distinguish those types, and others have a single fee, like Linwood, that's off on the right there. They just have anything non-residential, that's their fee. And this is what it looks like at 100%. The fees for commercial are still at the lower to mid range at the 100%. We did spend some time looking at what would the fees look like with example projects. And we took some of those example communities and we looked at a recently approved industrial building in Everett. That was over 300,000 square feet. And we applied other communities' transportation, parks, and school impact fees. Schools really wouldn't apply to industrial, they apply to multifamily, but we just sort of gathered that information, applied it to that size of a building, and then came up with a per square foot cost. And off on the dashed red lines there, you can see Everett at the 50% mark. Is less than $1 per square foot, which puts it closer to the Kent and Renton, off to the middle there. And then for multifamily, similarly, applying those fees, stacking them, you'd be on the lower end of the example fees charged to a similar larger sized multifamily development. The phase-in period I mentioned is an optional tool. The proposal that's before you would phase in the fee over an 18-month process. So at the time the ordinance would go into effect, there would be no fee. Within 9 months, half of the fee would be charged, and then with 18 months, it would be the full fee. The last component is a related set of code changes. Multifamily development in several of the zones that are in italics down there at the bottom are required to provide on-site private common space. Some developments may choose not to provide the on-site open space and request that the city allow them to pay a fee in lieu. It's already in the code, but there's not much in the way of standards. So it's not the same as doing a public park. It's putting private space for the use of the on-site residents. However, there could be an advantage to a developer to, especially if they're close to a public park, instead of putting a private common space on site, pay the equivalent amount using a neighborhood park as an example, and pay that amount, and they could up to 100% of their requirement for on-site open space could be paid fee in lieu if they're within a half mile of an existing or planned park. And recognizing that not all sites are, located in proximity, and there may be good reasons why to reduce the on-site open space, there would be an allowance for 50% of that fee in lieu to be paid if you're beyond that half mile. So before you is a recommendation from the Planning Commission. They had a unanimous recommendation to move the impact fee forward. They did make 2 amendments that were well discussed. One was we had originally proposed a partial fee exemption for low-income housing that is allowed in the law. It's optional. It was in there, and they, in a close vote, they just suggested not including that partial fee exemption for affordable housing. And they also recommended extending the phase-in period. The initial staff proposal was a 12-month phase-in, and they suggested an 18-month phase-in. So the council packet, the ordinance before you, includes the Planning Commission recommendations. So York, I think this is the overall schedule that's been put in place for this item. Tonight's briefing on November 3rd, just additional discussion if needed, a second reading next week, and the November 17th, a public hearing.
Great, thank you very much. Is that the end of the presentation?
That's the end of my slides. Yes, I believe York also has. So
I think that York, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we would be entertaining questions on this part of it at this time, and York and myself and Lisa would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. We will do that now. We'll go down the roll, and if I can find it, starting with Councilmember Moore.
Yes, it's me. I just want to compliment the presentation, the thoroughness. I really have no questions at this time. Lisa, that was an excellent presentation, a lot of information, and you did a really good job of articulating it. So thank you. I appreciate your presence at the meeting tonight.
Thank you. And we'll go to Councilmember Vogely.
Hello. A few times early on, you mentioned CEMEX.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
I'll take CEMEX is the vacant property next to Phil Johnson ball fields.
Oh, okay. Then I know exactly what that is. Great. Right now, that's the only question. That is a lot of information, and I will probably have a couple questions next time, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I don't have any questions right now. It's a lot of information. I want to go back through it, and I'll send out any questions I might have later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President. Echoing a great presentation, and also want to say thanks for all the hard work on the part of staff, our consultants, Planning Commission. I know Parks Board is doing a heavy lift on this too, so grateful for the work they've done. A couple of questions here. You know, we look at lack of parks or parks, but I know to some extent we've also looked at the resources that the school districts offer if they're open to be able to use those facilities. And also, obviously, as you pointed out there's a discount for on-site space for developers. And I know there are some of those as well. If we take those into account, what kind of data or nice maps do you have that take those into account, Lisa?
Sure, Councilmember Bader, we do have maps showing how those gaps in the 10-minute walk could be filled with if the schools were open after hours or on weekends for general purpose use, and they do help fill the gaps. They don't fully do it, but they do make a difference. And similarly, we have identified a joint type of park project that's in the capital list that would be a joint effort with surface water, which would be stormwater parks. And they have identified a number of sites in the south end of the city. And the story map link that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there are those maps available. They're pretty easy to scroll through. And there's also a map where people can drop comments and they can zoom in and see the gap areas. But I would say our capital program is designed to meet that 10-minute walk. And the fact that the Parks Impact Fee pays a good portion, but not all, means that the city can use those other partnership opportunities to help fill those gaps. And I'd say stormwater parks and schools are a part of, if the fee is at 50%, we still have to meet the level of service, keep the level of service as proposed. The city would seek other sources and partnerships.
Good information. And just since the same taxpayers who pay for our parks are paying for the school facilities that are great recreational facilities as well, I just want to keep that in mind. Also, I appreciate what the Planning Commission has done with the fees and everything, and the graphs that you showed there. Certainly, I see the ones that are relevant for us to compare against are Marysville, which is shown there, but obviously, certainly as it looks like they have very low fees. Lake Stevens, which isn't on there, in Snohomish County as well. So I'm glad the Planning Commission moved toward an option that at least appears to keep us relatively in the same neighborhood as Marysville, and I don't know if it does for Lake Stevens or the county as well. But grateful for the work they did. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. Lisa, good to see you again. Had the good fortune of working with Lisa some years back, and great presentation. And I too appreciate the comparisons. I didn't fully track the Planning Commission. I mean, I was trying to track what you were telling me about the changes that the Planning Commission made. And I would appreciate it if you wouldn't mind just giving me the quick summary of that again, so I understand it. Anyway, that either you or Bob or York.
Sure, I can start off, and I think York or Bob may want to chime in there. So on the partial fee exemption, there was a proposal to discount up to 80% of the park impact fee for low-income housing. It was sort of graduated by income level. You got more of a break for particularly low-income housing. I think the Planning Commission was concerned that the demand for parks wouldn't change, with a development being a low-income development. It would be similar to other developments. And I think there was a consideration that perhaps their funding mix for the low-income housing, that changing the fee would probably not result in a remarkable number more of units, and yet there would still be the demand. So I think that was the weighing and balancing that they made on that one.
So if I understand that correctly, and I'm not sure how it would be measured, but the deeper the subsidy for the housing, the lower the fee. And in a sense, it's an offset then, because to the extent we're trying to build parks, we would have to subsidize the lack of the fee for that. So there's a sort of if I look at this as a balance or fulcrum, that's what you're describing then.
Right. I think my colleague Jason is here. I don't believe you would have to formally make up the difference because there wasn't 100% discount, yeah. But in practicality, because you're trying to maintain a certain level of service, the effect would be finding other resources to make sure things happened.
Okay, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Sure.
That's all. That's the only question I have. A lot of information, well presented. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I guess my only overriding question at this time, it really has to do with where we are placed in the fees of communities around us. I mean, we have, in the past, when we impose fees, we tend not to increase them over time, and we've been a little lax and falling behind on our fee schedule. And it looks like we're going to start out behind on our fee schedule if we look at the cities and communities that we believe are similar to ours in terms of size and complexity. So I think in the past we have used, you know, Auburn and Kent as more directly comparable cities rather than Marysville, which is much smaller and has kind of a unique. Lake Stevens, I think, is also smaller, and you know, we kind of think of ourselves in that other category with similar cities of similar population.
Yes, Councilmember, we do have two components that kind of get at this topic area. One is that the fee would be indexed to a construction cost index, an average of 2 indices on an annual basis so that it would keep up with inflation. And the other is there's sort of a built-in review period. It doesn't say what you would do at the conclusion of the review, but it says revisit this in the 5-year period so that you come back to it and see how, you know, if you're pursuing the other funding sources and partnerships, how's that been going? Do you still have, you know, the needs that have been identified? How does that relate to an impact fee? You could come back to it at that time.
Okay, that makes sense. And then starting out at such a low rate, I mean, we'd be at the bottom of the fee schedule in some of those. So was there a thinking that there's a chilling effect on development in our community if we try to be more, I think, in line with what I would consider more comparable cities?
That was some of the thinking. I'll let York or others weigh in on that, but there was a consideration that this is a new fee, a new park impact fee that the city hadn't charged before, and that the city was, you know, while it wants to put in parks as amenities and it does improve, you know, it does have a relationship to the local economy as a positive. It also is something that the city wants to attract, you know, multifamily and mixed use and other development to meet its vision. And it was thought that this fee in combination with other fees needed to be considered, you know, so that the city can, you know, balance other goals, and that if there were other ways to achieve the funding sources, you know, that maybe those could be pursued. So I think that was at least some of the conversation I recall.
I would concur with Lisa. I mean, she aptly said the thinking, the rationale behind the 50% fee, really just taking a look at all of the goals of the city and taking a look at a holistic approach to this. Instead of just taking just a park look at it, we believe that the 50% rate was in line and would help us best meet all of our goals.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, I think that's all I have for now. So this will come back to council later this month, and we have a couple other items on this the comprehensive plan amendment. Are we going to talk about those next, or should I read the next item?
Those are the next item, I think. So it depends
Okay.
if we need to read it in form.
I will read it. Item 10, Council Bill 2110-42, the first reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance amending the comprehensive plan land use map and zoning map for 7500 Hardison Road and amending ordinance number 2021-94 as amended as part of the 2021 annual docket of comprehensive plan amendments. Third and final reading and public hearing will be on November 17th. And we're back to Yorick.
Thank you, Council President Stonecipher. So this is, we'll pick up with the other two items that were part of this 2021 package. This proposal would change the land use designation and zoning for a 1.32 acre parcel at 7500 Hardison Road from industrial to commercial mixed use on the comprehensive plan map, and from light industrial 2 to business on the zoning map. The property was recently developed under the current zoning with the gas station and a convenience store. And I'll say on the criteria side, we've got a listing of the criteria, and staff does feel that this proposal meets the applicable criteria for a comprehensive plan change and a rezone. One note is that staff does feel it's important to protect land that is designated for industry. We wrestled with that a little bit, but on the other hand, it makes a lot of sense that the thousands of industrial workers in the area, with more to come, need somewhere to go to access everyday services like food and coffee. And we thought that this intersection represented a good location for such a commercial, retail, and services node. And the prospects for industrial development on this parcel also didn't look great given the topography and the development pattern in the area. So this was originally a request from the property owner from this rezone, but one that staff supported as well. In addition to staff, the Planning Commission recommends approval. And it's just a quick overview. Happy to take any questions on it.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions from our council members, starting with Council Member Moore.
Yes, just again, a thorough presentation. I am still absorbing, so I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. Council Member Vogely.
Yeah, I can't start my video, but you can hear me. So my question is, oh, here we go. Okay. There's already a 7-Eleven that was just opened on there, on that particular piece of property. So it's already been approved, essentially. So why does it need to be more approved?
As I understand it, there is a desire on behalf of the property owner for flexibility for, so food and beverage, for instance, is not permitted. The 7-Eleven convenience store fits under the definition of gas station, which is permitted on industrial land, but food and beverage is not. And that is something that's in demand at that intersection. There's a few other restaurants and food and beverage services kitty corner across the intersection, and those are non-conforming. They're in the light industrial zone. I think they were established before that zone, or the food and beverage used to be allowed, and now it's not. Non-conforming puts some constraints on the operation of the business, and I think that was some of the rationale.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
And you could fit a little bit more onto the site as well, so that the site is developed, but there is room for more development.
Those restaurants are so yummy. Okay, that is all.
Councilmember Tui.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I don't have any more questions at this time. Thanks.
Councilmember Bader.
Thanks. No questions or comments either.
Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks. No questions or comments.
And I have no questions or comments. We'll go to item 11, Council Bill 2110-43, the first reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance amending the comprehensive plan land use map and building heights map, EMC 19.22.150 for portion of Smith Island. Third and final reading and public hearing will also be on the 17th of this month. Yorick.
Thank you again, Council President Stonecipher. The last proposal in this batch of amendments would amend 2 official city maps covering the Smith Island West annexation area, which became effective in June of this year. The first map amendment would remove the resource lands designation from areas waterward of the ordinary high water mark within the annexation from the comprehensive plan land use map. This is an effort that we undertook with the rest of the city some years back to remove any designation from underwater submerged lands. And we are catching up to that with the Smith Island annexation. And then the second map amendment would target the maximum building height map that is related to the city's zoning map. And it would establish a maximum building height designation of 7 floors for the annexed land area. The annexation earlier this year was paired with a comprehensive plan land use designation of industrial and a zoning of heavy industrial. But we overlooked that the city now, since Rethink Zoning, has a separate map for maximum building heights. That's a relative rarity for cities, although it is a concept that I really like, and I think that led to that oversight. Right now, that map remains blank for the annexation area, which means that effectively no development would be permitted at all until that's fixed. Staff proposes to extend the same 7-story height limit, which equates to 75 feet to the newly annexed portion of the island. And that's the same height limit that is in effect for the rest of the island west of I-5. And if you're wondering where the 7-story limit came from, as the Planning Commission did, that was translated from the 80-foot limit that was associated with the M2 zone when Rethink Zoning was adopted, and this building height map was separated from a height limit that was previously associated with each individual zone. Notably, this area is under the jurisdiction of the city's development regulations, but also the city's shoreline master program and flood hazard regulations. So it's a heavily regulated area, and any proposed development would need to be consistent with those shoreline policies and regulations, as well as the development regulations. The staff recommends approval, and the Planning Commission agreed, recommending approval of this proposal.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions or comments. Councilmember Moore.
No, this is more than a debut. This is a 4-star presentation from you, Yorick. Very well presented. Thank you.
Councilmember Vogely.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Toohey.
I have no more questions or comments. Thank you, Yurick.
Councilmember Bader.
Questions or comments either? Thank you.
Councilmember Roberts.
No questions, just appreciate Yorick, you're pointing out this is a heavily regulated area, and by and large, the regulations aren't changing. It's simply defining the envelope, if you will, for building within that. Thanks.
Thank you. And I have no questions or comments. That brings us to the end of our agenda. As noted at the start of the meeting and provided on the screen and on our city website, you may contact Deb Williams in the council office for instructions on watching, listening, or participating in our weekly meeting. She can be reached by phone at 425-257-8703 or by email at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. And with no further business, we are now adjourned.